Anthony Moyles is with us in studio. Anthony, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Ger.
Really? How are you?
I'm a long-suffering Spurs fan, Ger, so throw that into the mix.
As the kids would text you okay, hon?
Yeah, you okay. Difficult weekend. Spurs, we'll just park those. You know what? The amazing thing is, I saw some people mention it, very little enthusiasm, very little excitement, and a real sense of trepidation amongst Meath supporters before that game. And it was there for a reason.
It isn't a shock. It's a shock, but it's not a shock.
Correct. Yeah, it's not a shock. And I suppose there's two things. You can, I suppose, concentrate in the game. The game, Offaly were full value for the game, as you know, they showed during the league. Meath got out of jail against them, and even last year in the championship, Offaly would have felt that they were probably in that game and should have got some kind of result out of the game. And again, you have a situation, I suppose, where are this Meath team, Colin O'Rourke was saying they deserve to be in the Tailteann Cup? Well,
that's correct.
That's correct. Yeah. The results don't lie. You take the two results out from the very first two games in the league, when they caught Cork in a bit of a shootout, could have easily lost that game. Could you be facing Division 3 now and Tailteann Cup? And then you would absolutely rightly say, well, this is the competition for them. Is it the competition for them? In other words, so do they go, they play some teams, they get a bit of confidence, they maybe get to a final, maybe they win it. The players actually see that instead of being at the other end of getting drubbings, they're actually on the opposite end. There's a bit of confidence built, they get a bit of camaraderie built, and they actually realise, Gina, you know what, we're not as bad footballers as we thought we were, or as people say we are. And maybe it gives the management team a time to then actually just to try to build and solidify and actually make them a unit that can advance next year. But my worry is the opposite could happen, actually. I think, I'm hearing loads of stuff, and of course rumours and everything else. I'm not that close to the camp, so I can't, and people will say, well, which I'm not, so. But I'm hearing rumours. I've seen some things and I've heard some things that would kind of give me alarm bells, to be honest with you. And alarm bells around the camp itself, how happy the camp is, and how solid they are as a group, and how much they're willing to kind of put the shoulder to the wheel. So that's a big worry.
Okay, are there players who aren't playing in the panel at the moment who are better than the players? Is that one of the issues, that they don't have the best available, or is this actually the best players largely, with maybe one or two exceptions?
I think largely it is probably the best of players, bar one or two. Like we've spoken before about Conor McGill. Okay, so we've already touched that. But I suppose there's just a few decisions that I think, I know Colin was saying no excuses, but they've kind of rattled through all the excuses during the league: conditioning, inexperience, this, various different things. But like, when I look at the team yesterday, I'll give you an example. So there's a young lad, Owen Harkin, who played in the Kildare game, the last game in the league, which was a pretty important game, you would have felt. He starts that game, but then after the game he's dropped from the whole panel,
right? Which
is a very strange decision. So he's out. He starts. He's obviously embedded in the 15. Then he's gone out of 30. Young Coffey plays yesterday, who saw, I think, little or no league time. Ronan Ryan, who is a fellow who plays with Summerhill, who were in the county final, and who were one of the perennial senior teams in Meath. He gets very little game time during the league, but then he starts full back yesterday. You also get 4 debutants. Just kind of some strange decisions that you kind of scratch your head and say, well, if he was going to be the full-back and he hasn't really played would he not have played full-back all the way throughout the league, right? Then, as we've said on this team, you build your team from the defence. You make sure you're rock solid there, and then you worry about the other end. We don't have a marquee forward. We don't have a Conor McManus. We haven't had one for a long time. So therefore, you need to say, well, this is a collective effort, and the most we're going to probably try to get is 112, 113 in a game, 14, 15 points. We're not going to get 20 odd points, and that's just it.
So do Meath have 15, 20 players that are better than Tailteann Cup, that are top 16 in Ireland, talent-wise, right now?
Well, when you look across the board, there's probably, I think there's probably 6 to 8 teams. Like there's the top 8, right? And then there's another 8 who are just making the most out of what they have. I don't think Meath are making the most out of what they have. Right, so I think a team can be set up, and a team can be to say, right, well, you know what, we're going to make it very difficult. So you look at Down yesterday. I thought that was a really good game. Donegal put a lot into that game, considering all the stuff that has gone before. They were well within the game. They could have won it, but Down came with an energy, with a purpose, with a setup, with a style of play that they said, by hook or by crook, we're going to die on our sword today, and we're going to go. And as it happens, they won the game. That's a Division 3 team versus, essentially a Division.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally a Division 1 team over the last number of years, and who still have largely a playing squad who beat Kerry in the league.
Yeah, exactly. So, so are they making the most out of what they have? Yes. And by the way, and Down has been a complete disaster the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Loads written.
So you can't turn it around quickly is the other thing.
Well, you can, but I think again, Conor Laverty, what they've done under 20s the last few years, they've obviously got the county board right behind. And I think people say, "Oh, county." It does. It starts from the top. There's this horrible thing going on in Meath for the last number of years, and it started with Andy McEntee, which was they felt Andy was picking an awful lot of South Meath players, right? Which is where the big, I suppose, population zones are. The Ratotes, the Dunboynes, the Dunham or Ashburns. But it's just a virtue of numbers, right? Now, when you go from this thing, he should be picking North Meath players, it's this thing of, well, just pick the best players.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter where your father's from. Doesn't matter where your mother's from. Doesn't matter where you could be from Timbuktu. Yeah. Come in and this whole thing of and I heard Colin, and I have to say it was, I know it was a bit in jest on the Tommy Tiernan thing, but this thing of, we're going to collect all the Dublin flags and we're going to burn them. I don't know if it goes on in Kildare, right? Kildare are in the same boat, right? Loads of border towns across Dublin, loads of people, migrating into Kildare. But you know what? Embrace it. Best of luck. Fantastic. Be inclusive rather than kind of be the other way. Because I tell you, people might say it doesn't really matter. It does matter. It does matter. You have to have a sense of purpose. Meath is not what it was 25 years ago. It's a different county. It's a different county. It's full of different accents. It's full of different people. But you have to pull that together. And if you don't pull it together, and your sense of purpose then is to make the best of who we have, you're going absolutely nowhere in my view. It starts there, I think.
You don't want to be too critical of somebody who has decided to give it their all this year in what Colin O'Rourke has done. But if you look at what Duignan did, Duignan went and got involved at county board level. And actually, maybe if you want to make long-term significant changes, you can be a sticking plaster with the inter-county side. But if the county board is the way that it has been, with the fight with the management between the under-20s and the senior team, with having to run for your own job again that Andy McEntee had, maybe that would have been better for Colin to spend his time doing that as opposed to trying to come in and fix the team.
Yeah, I'm not laying the blame at Colin's door entirely. Absolutely not. I'm saying it's a county thing. As a matter of fact, it's a
who we are.
It's who we are, exactly. And I know a number of years ago people were looking to say, well, who we need to get the Meathness back in Meath. But it has changed, and I'm not saying Colin is out of touch, but maybe even I'm out of touch. But these are new, these are young lads who have grown up in a different county, right? Yeah. Who have grown up with the behemoth at the door, and who have regularly set themselves up for a tanking every time they've gone in against. And by the way, make no bones about it, that's the way it's going to go again this year, right? For whoever's left. Unless I'm absolutely, you see what they do to Laois yesterday,
yeah,
right? The writing's on the wall.
I wouldn't say many Kildare fans are particularly excited about the fact that there's a trip to Croker to face the Dubs, and our reward might be to drop into the Tailteann Cup in the aftermath of that. And you know what, maybe that might be the thing for this team and for everybody to the one thing I'd say about Kildare is that they do have talented footballers who it doesn't feel like we're getting the best out of them at the moment,
Well, you're talking about the second 8 teams, the purpose that they have, and they're well organised and well coached. When you look at what O'Rourke has brought in around him, so, the other pundit that left, Kevin McStay, goes into Mayo and he brings this superstar lineup of coaches in around him. Even reading the analysis today of Galway, it's like, this was a Cian O'Neill game plan executed to perfection. Pork Joyce brings in one of the top coaches alongside him. Mark McHugh goes in down at Roscommon. is there a sense that around me that maybe O'Rourke or the county board underestimated the coaching nous that was needed as well?
I don't know. Garrigan came in, who was one of the main guys with the ladies team, and has a good CV and quite a good CV, I believe, with regard to coaching and different teams. You know, Stephen Bray and Barry Callahan are in there. They've got a strong backroom team, but you know, look, again, without knowing the intricacies of what happens in there, you would have felt that the first thing we would do is we would get our defensively set up strong. That's the first thing. Let's make sure, as all teams have, be it Mayo or whoever it is, you know, Kerry in the last number of years, let's set up defensively strong and then let's look after the other end as we go. But it just hasn't transpired that way. I think the idea was we'll be a traditional setup, we'll get the ball in early, we'll kind of go man on man at the back, and we'll see how we go. And that has not worked, right? It hasn't worked. And it's very difficult to change that midstream. Very, very difficult.
Well, it's difficult to retain credibility with the group when you're saying we tried that thing and it didn't work and now we have to go to something different, but we haven't done any practice for it. So let's work it out.
Yeah, and there's probably also an acceptance, Ger, to be honest with you. You know, I've been at plenty of Meath games where you hear fellas saying, kick it in, get rid of it, you know, because they don't like teams holding on to it. There has to be an acceptance as well that, you know what, you might go 4 or 5 minutes with absolutely boring football just to retain possession, but that's just it.
That's the game.
That's the game.
The game doesn't change. So we should talk briefly about Offaly. We will do more on Offaly during the week. It's an incredible achievement for them. And on the other side, they're going to be up against Louth, who came back from the dead against Westmeath. And you'd hope that Westmeath didn't have in the back of their heads, well, it doesn't really matter to us because we're already through. Because like them beating Louth and them beating Offaly in a semi-final would have been great for them to get a chance against the Dubs and then to catapult into. And it would have felt, so it feels a little bit like Westmeath haven't built on the Tailteann Cup success. Now, maybe they shock us with a big home win against somebody in the round robin in Sam Maguire, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't. That's going to be a massive kick for them yesterday. Like, that's a game that they should really see out. It's a game that I'm sure they were thinking at half time, we keep this tight second half. Yeah, they'll come back, they'll have their purple patch. There was probably a few warning signs there though in the first half. Louth had 2 or 3 goal chances that the keepers made good saves on, and there was warning signs to say actually they could slip in here and get in behind us, which they did then repeatedly in the second half. But yeah, as you say, building on, you would have thought that Tailteann Cup would have been a springboard for them, and it hasn't been. Louth, on the other hand, you know, like I saw Mickey Hart saying they were just playing for pride in the second half. Well, you know, there were reports from it were saying real lack of intensity in the first half, allowing Westmeath just to kind of run through them. You know, no real kind of zip, no energy. And probably a little bit of expectation on them too. You know, they were coming into this game with everyone saying, oh, you know, where could they go here? And they've done a great league. And all of a sudden then you're like, whoa, we're 1-7, 1-8, whatever it was down. So to be fair to them, that's you know, they could have gone the other way, but they stuck in it, and once they got going, they've got some seriously talented footballers.
That's the thing,
and they've got a lot of power and a lot of pace. And they actually then played a very different style where they opened up in that second half to what they have, because they had to chase the game. But yeah, you know, remarkable result by them.
Let's talk about Galway, because Galway handled their business against Roscommon. There was, again, the purple patch at the start of the second half where Roscommon created and scored, and it felt like they were seizing the initiative of the game. We'd seen Roscommon finish games really strongly, but for whatever reason Roscommon couldn't keep going with that. And I didn't really know what to make of Galway's performance. It required a massive slice of luck with the ball coming back down to Comer for him to score the goal, and that just seemed to knock the stuffing out of Roscommon, which I didn't expect. So I don't know what.
There was a good bit of analysis on the Sunday game last night of Galway's reaction to conceding the goal and holding on to possession for pretty much 2.5 minutes and just recycling it and stalling that bit of maturity that Galway now have of in-game management.
Yeah, but at the same time there's a kick out that gets spilled, and if Conor Cox catches it instead of slips, and Cox is just off the bench, and maybe if it had happened 5 minutes later there would have been a second goal for them. And so like a little bit of that I think is post-fact analysis, because
I thought there's two things I think that really stand out for you. Galway, there is a maturity with Galway. Joyce understands that certain aspects of the game, such as Shane Walsh being essentially nearly marked out of the game yesterday, that he needs a foil in his forward line, and that foil is Burke, who I thought was absolutely fantastic yesterday. So people will look at his performance and say, well, what exactly? But he's a link man. He stitches an awful lot of stuff together for them. He presents himself, and then he literally will hand pass left or right and kick pass. He brings other players into it, and what he does is he generally stays in the D. So that's where he does all of his work. He's got a really smart brain, but they were definitely thinking to themselves, you know what, we're kicking on here. I thought Roscommon were a bit lacklustre first half. They didn't have their usual zip, their usual energy. When they started in the second half, they really came at them.
Yeah.
Galway looked at it 6s and 7s, but they wrestled it back. And I think even pre the goal, which was a slice of luck, they had already kind of said, right, calm this down. Burke had actually come out around midfield. So he ventured out the field, and he just got on the ball and just kind of said, listen, let's take it handy, as you say, Nathan, and the goal was, look, it was a poacher's goal. It was what you'd want from Comer, but Joyce will definitely look at it and kind of think, we're not a million miles ahead here, and we still have work to do.
Yeah.
And Roscommon should look at it and say, well, actually, we had a terrible first half. Like, Murta was shockingly bad. Nothing would go right for them in the first half. As I say, they had no energy where they usually have from their half backs. Fellas tearing up the field. All of a sudden, the second half, they were getting scores from fullback, cornerback, halfback, which is what they've been doing. So Roscommon will say, listen, we'll never be, or hopefully we won't be as bad like again in that first half, and we need to take more from what we did in the second half. But it's definitely Galway. I don't think are the finished article yet, and I think he still has a lot of work to do.
It's interesting what you're saying about Ian Burke. Like, are there many better forwards at the moment at making their other forwards look good than Ian Burke?
He was up there. He's kind of in the Paddy Clifford mode, but Clifford now has actually what Paddy has been doing a lot, because fellas man mark him a lot. He's dropping deeper to get involved and kind of quarterbacking it from there. Whereas Burke actually stays in the mix, which is really, really good. So what he's able to do there is, people are expecting the ball to go into Comer when actually it doesn't. It goes into him. And he feeds Comer on loops or on runs or on fast runs, and Walsh. So he's certainly, for a guy that kind of was out in the wilderness a bit, had a great couple of years, a number of years ago, then went out into it. He's changed his game, where he was always kind of a fella who was inside. You put ball into him and he'd take his man on. He's you watch him yesterday. I'd say he hardly took a solo or a bounce. Every time he got the ball, he just looked to ship it.
Roscommon are in pot 3, Mayo are in pot 3. That was the whole point that we were making the whole way along. It doesn't matter. I guess Roscommon will be happier that they've had this extra game and they've measured themselves. Maybe they feel a bit better about life than Mayo do this morning. I don't know. It's like...
yeah, it's hard to know.
I always feel quite good about life, I'll be honest with you, so I wouldn't worry about that, Ger.
It's hard to know. I don't think they'll be massively disappointed, Ger, because I think when they really look back on the game, but I never felt the sense yesterday, even with the, as you say, the slice of luck, I thought they had put a massive amount of effort into that 10 or 15 minutes to get back. And they went one up, I think, at one stage, didn't they? They went one up. But I just felt that they had kind of, because they flagged after that.
Yeah.
They looked like they were kind of... Now, the game was still in the melting pot with 3 or 4 minutes to go, even though they were 2 or 3 behind. Galway didn't put them to the sword as I thought they would have. But I think in Galway's muscle memory, Galway gave them a lot of respect. And Galway kind of said, you know what, these fellas have got the ability to catch us out.
Yeah.
So Galway kind of also said, well, what we have, we hold here, and they didn't go too crazily offensive in that last kind of 7 or 8 minutes. Now Comer got the fisted score, but they were kind of saying, we're going to just make sure that we don't concede goals here. And they very nearly did, but I don't think Roscommon are going to be thereabouts. Like, they've massively impressed me.
We still, Armagh, again, handled their business, and Ulster has been tricky for McGeeney. Provincial championships have been tricky for McGeeney in his managerial career. I don't know if it's coincidence or it's just been the luck of the draw over the years, but they've got to get down to get into an Ulster final, and this team feels like I mean, I'm kind of going against myself here, and his record in the qualifiers is sensational. So, do they need to beat Down? Do they need to, like, is that part of their season, their story?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they handle business, but the people were talking about Cavan, the amount of shots Cavan had, and people say, oh well, Armagh people will say, well, they were shooting from wide angles. Our defence did what they needed to do, make them shoot way out left and right, make them shoot under pressure. But I think they had 30 odd shots. That's a lot of shots, and what Down have fellas who can kick from the arc. Down have guys who can come out on the loop, and if they won't do that, I tell you what they'll do. They'll break really quickly, and they run one touch, fellas coming off the shoulder. So I think this is a really, really, really tricky game for McGeeney. I think it's a very, very. It's not going to be a banana skin if they lose, but this is a game that I think offers them a completely different challenge. Cavan, I thought, were lacklustre. From the goals, you can see that their defence were, nearly walking back. They didn't tag runners, similar to the Donegal situation. And Armagh did what they needed to do. And I often feel, and I know we've said this in the last while, Armagh nearly set themselves out to meet every single opponent. They kind of changed their game slightly to meet that particular opponent. They may go more defensive, they may go more offensive, they may decide we're playing a running game. And it's sometimes made a paralysis by analysis, that they're not just go out and play your own game.
They were
sometimes
so good
maybe
in Croker last year. Do you know? Like I do wonder maybe.
Yeah, like you've missed that kind of Reno Neal on the square and big balls going in early and him going up fetching them, and you haven't kind of seen that. Now maybe they're keeping it back. You wouldn't know, but at some time that's going to have to come out, and I would feel that's going to have to come out against Down, because Down are very, very good at creating, and they did it with Donegal. They just trap you and then they go on the break really fast. So it's a tricky one for them. But Down, full value, and look, Armagh looked after business, as you say.
Okay.
The Reno Neal clearance, the moment of the weekend, unbelievable.
Savage. Even just to get himself into that position, but to understand that the only place that this shot can go is here, so therefore I have to get across to it. Most fellas would stand up and just look and say,
and to not even just palm it back into trouble or anything.
Yeah,
to have the awareness to be able to get it out.
Yeah, Ethan Rafferty might be in trouble in nets.
We talked briefly about Down and the quality of their performance, but it does go to show what's possible when there is alignment between the clubs, the inter-county manager. Obviously, he had a big reputation as a manager coming in. There was high expectations. The league was a bit in and out, but ultimately, I think he got exactly what he wanted from it. And again, to Nathan's point earlier, it does show how quickly you can turn things around if you get the right people in the room and say, "This is what our ambition is. Let's go," and everybody goes.
Well, he had a big reputation, but he'd only played, I think, a year before, so he put himself out there. Young guy, young family. You're talking about this fella is putting himself up here for, if it doesn't go well, he's going to get absolutely ripped to shreds. And a lot of people might have said, with all the turmoil that's going on, maybe I'll give it a year or two or 3 or 4 years. He could have said, maybe when I'm 40 odd, I'll decide to take this. He did. It was a brave move by him, Ger, because they were an absolute mess. They started to show a little bit of green shoots, but the Kilcoo thing, obviously, the trust of the players, and them all focused on the North Star and all going in the one direction. Everyone, county board, everyone. And it just shows you when it is. That's why would be my worry for Donegal. I think Aidan O'Rourke, got Donegal and probably potentially is squeezing the last out, because my worry would be that unravels very quickly and Donegal could slide, and could slide quite rapidly, which is a worry.
You want Donegal if you're so they're going to be in pot 4. As it stands, I think there's a few other results that might be able to. I don't think they can get into pot 3. Maybe they can, but you wouldn't mind having Donegal in your group if you're one of the top teams. You're like, that's grand. I'm chalking that down as a victory.
I think you'd be fairly confident. Yeah, because that was a big effort, as I say. I do think they genuinely were. You could see the endeavour they were putting in, the chasing back. They slipped it a couple of times, and there was nearly this force of nature that Down were just going to win that game. And when you have that that weight that has been going on in the county for the last 3 to 4 months with all the stuff, it just comes at you, and it comes at you, of course, at the wrong times. And people can say, oh well, that wouldn't really make a difference. It does make a difference. It makes a difference in your preparation, it makes a difference in everything. You know, it makes a difference in questioning yourself. Did we make the right move with Paddy Carr? It's on us if this goes awry. It's just noise, it's a distraction, and you don't need that coming into a game. So yeah, if you got them, I think you'd be fairly happy having them in the pot.
Dublin, it was 4-15 in the first half, I think, what they scored, and 15 points only in the second half. They took their foot off the gas, clearly. But I think a few things were important in that. Mannion started, McCaffrey started. Like, the thing that we need to see from Dublin is that those players have game time and they're fit by the time All-Ireland quarter-final happens.
Yeah.
Actually, nothing really matters up to that point. But once the quarter-finals arrive, is Con fit, which he wasn't last year against Kerry, they'll have Mannion and they'll have Chet McCaffrey, and suddenly they have strengthened that almost directly because of that.
Well, I think the chairman of the Leinster Council made his obligatory half-time visit to the Dublin dressing room to say, lads, look, seriously, take a handy, will you? To win a few subs there, someone. But it's you know, Howard comes on, bangs over one of his outside of the right from midfield. Looks lively again, looks strong, looks lean. They take James McCarthy off to give him a bit of a break. Colin Pascal running the show at 11, which is very, very interesting. I saw his name on the team sheet and I said to myself, oh, is he going to start? Because I actually think Pascal has unbelievable amount of talent. But I've seen him over the last year or two with Dublin, and he's like, if you remember Ballybowden went on the big run. Like, he was imperious that year. You know, like, unbelievably good, massive speed, great ability, really, really tidy on the ball, well able to take a score. And I felt over the last while that he's just come in and has been a bit player, you know, shifting passes on rather than going for scores himself. But obviously over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and actually 1 or 2 of the last league games, he came on and was actually being a bit more selfish.
Right.
But he was very, very good yesterday.
Sometimes the penny drops for players in their mid-20s.
Exactly, it can happen. Yeah. But, you know,
and they've had too many players like that over the last 3 or 4 years. It's sort of why there's been that big decline.
Yeah, and who haven't put their hand up.
You expect them to kick on, but it's the same guys to rely on.
Exactly.
Does that change Kilkenny's role in any way?
I think it probably does. You know, I think what it'll do is it can. I think they've missed that focus of an 11. Because Kilkenny does this roving role where he shifts from, you know, east to west all the time. Like, they need a guy who has pace, who, if they look up and they need to hit an out ball, he has the ability to go and be that out ball. And I think and also a guy who can, you know, I think Kilkenny can nearly be a foil now in the full forward line, where he can drift out, get involved if he want, but they also himself, and you wouldn't fancy leaving himself and Con inside in the full forward line,
because then you can lorry a ball in from anywhere.
Correct.
Now it looked like they dropped Kilkenny for the league final against Derry, and he comes on after 5 minutes because there's an injury, and then gets in the team for this. So I don't know, but just very quickly, the subs bench that came on: Brian Howard, Owen Murchan, Cormac Costello, Dean Rock, Craig Diaz.
Never heard of them.
What have you done for me lately?
Do you know,
yeah.
That's why I'd have them number 1. But anyway, obviously didn't even talk about Kerry and Kerry's game against Tip, where again, I don't know how good it is for Tipperary. I don't know how good it is for Laois. Everybody had the chance to fix this, and no one wanted to fix it. So
we are where we are.
Cry me a river, lads.
Yeah.
Kerry also very good, it turns out, and Clifford's like. It must be hard for David Clifford to be that excited about these games at this stage, where it's like, I have fish to fry in the summertime in Croke Park. These are not fish.
You'd love if we had players of that arrogance, if he actually was just, that was the attitude in the dressing room beforehand. That's really, do you need me today?
Jack, do you really, like, you know, I'm busy. You know, things to do.
Anthony, good stuff.
Cheers, lads.
17 minutes past 9 this morning, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Got the ultimate shave or your money back Neon Light Edition available now.